Hi everyone and welcome. Today is the 26th of March 2025 and I am joined by Micheal Hudson, a household name in the world of economics. I guess the world is changing very rapidly, we see. The US seems to be adjusting to multipolarity. It needs to have a new priorities. Europe seemingly is less of a priority, while there seems to be a need to make peace with Russia. And we see that on the European side, rather than, I guess, pulling back from the proxy war against Russia, the Europeans insist now that they will continue the war without the United States, which again is a bit doubtful, but it also gets worse. Using money they don't have to build weapons that won't be produced for many years. And again, the purpose of defeating Russia, which isn't clearly defined how that would actually work. So a lot of this doesn't make sense, and a lot of people have been trying to make sense of it. Um, how do you see, I guess, the economic and political narratives that has led Europe down this path?
Well, you're quite right, Glenn, when you say it doesn't make sense. And the situation today is very different. When I began 60 years ago as an economist, and I stopped calling myself an economist and began calling myself a futurist when I worked with the Hudson Institute and the Futures Group. And being a futurist, you could go beyond economics. And it was very easy to explain why countries were acting in the way they acted. You just said, well, what's their self-interest? And if they understood what their self-interest was, then you just plan it all out and say, well, does it intersect with other countries' self-interest? How do you put them together? And obviously, as you've discussed all along and just said, the seemingly obvious European, especially German self-interest is to be complementary with Russia, to do exactly what it was doing for the last few decades, to get energy from Russia and give Russia what it needs: industrial goods, industrial investment to make its own cars and automobiles and consumer goods. So the real question is, how do you explain why Europe seems not to be acting in its self-interest and taking this bellicose Cold War split that it's doing today? Well, you pointed out before that it's all about the narrative, that somehow there is a false narrative that overwhelms the natural reality. And I think it's natural for people to understand what is reality, and it's more difficult to make them twist it around into accept a false narrative. And I've been trying to figure out, why would Europe and especially Germany, and especially the new leader, Merz, from BlackRock, have this idea that the future of Europe lies in fighting with Russia. And I think I've got the answer. And that is, they have a false economic narrative that underlines everything, a false worldview. And it's the worldview that underlies the way that the Eurozone was set up. It's a false economic view. And it's called, in America, we call that military Keynesianism. The idea that if you spend money on the military budget, that's going to create investment and employment. And that is a way of injecting government money into the economy by running deficits. Well, the problem for Europe is the Eurozone's rule that prevents it from running a deficit of more than just, I think, 5% of GDP. And Europe, especially right now, has so many social spending programs that it needs, including subsidizing families so that they can afford to buy the energy that they're not buying from Russia anymore, but have to buy from the United States at 4 times the price at LNG, liquefied natural gas. How do you get around this? Well, think of what Donald Trump was trying to get Europe to do, saying, well, you've got to believe the framework, the myth that Russia is going to attack Europe and trying to recreate the old Soviet empire. Well, we know that that's not the case because no country can afford to invade another country, a big country, anymore. It would take 10 or 20 million Russian troops. And the big thing is, Europe doesn't have anything now that Russia particularly wants. But what I think Mertz's idea is, well, if we say that we are defending ourselves against an enemy, then all of a sudden we have a national security excuse for going beyond the constraint of the Eurozone on how much money we can spend. And if we say that we're spending militarily, I think he's talked about almost €1 trillion on spending rearmament on European industry, then somehow that is going to spur German, French, maybe even English economic recovery. Well, that's the obvious question is, do you really need to go to war or have a war-like narrative in order just to enable the government to pump money into the economy to promote a Keynesian policy of economic recovery? Obviously, Europe needs to recover right now economically. It's in a mess. Its industry's been closing down because of the end of Nord Stream and the end of importing from Russia. There's a kind of idea that only economists would have, a kind of tunnel vision that thinks that it's somehow if you pump money into the economy, it's all going to be amorphous and fungible and turned into GDP, and that can be a recovery. And the only way that I can explain why Europe is following such an unrealistic policy to believe that it has to conjure up fears of war with Russia over Ukraine, and indeed sabotages any attempt by the United States to end its conflict with Russia so it can pursue other conflicts elsewhere, is this tunnel vision of economists that think that somehow you have to go to war in order to let the government spend money into the economy to revive the economy, as if that's going to revive the economy. Well, you can just imagine the silliness of thinking almost €1 trillion for arms. It's going to take many years to do this, many years of investment. All right, that investment's going to employ labor and expand the economy. And but the problem is, who's going to buy the arms? The only producing arms is not like producing washing machines and cars, which consumers can use. It's not like producing capital goods and machinery that investors can use. There's really no use for arms except to have them destroyed by other people going to war with each other. And it really is, it's the West that's going to war with the rest of the world. I don't think the rest of the world has many needs for arms except to defend itself against the new Cold War from the West. And so obviously you're not going to have Asia and the United States buying European arms to fight each other.